Most people think breaking into finance is about having the perfect background. But what if it's really about how you position yourself? Welcome back to another episode of the Refined Brew Collective, where we have real conversations about career paths, growth, and what it actually takes to build a life you are proud of. I'm your host, Ashley. Today's guest is a business finance senior analyst who's worked across top institutions and built a strong foundation in finance, analytics, and risk. But what makes his story interesting isn't just where he's worked, it's how he's grown through every stage of his journey. In this episode, we're breaking down what this career actually looks like, how to stand out in a competitive market, and how the industry is evolving with AI and technology. So, if you've ever been curious about finance, analytics, or how to create your own path, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Let's get into it. Welcome, Ismail.
Thank you, Ashley. Happy to be here.
Before we get into your career, I want people to understand the person behind the title. What sparked your interest in finance or business analytics?
What first attracted me to it is curiosity. I wanted to understand how businesses grow, how money moves, and how people create opportunities with limited resources. Growing up, I saw how important money and financial decisions can be in everyday life, and I realized that almost like anything you want to build, you do require some understanding of finance, and then you also require some money to start any type of this kind of ventures. So what really interested me was understanding how businesses raise money, how do they manage it, grow it, and make better decisions. Money creates options, creates freedom as well. So, and I think business analytics came later, realizing that data is one of the most powerful tool businesses use to actually make small decisions. So that combination is really what drew me to the finance and what keeps me in finance.
I would say your background and upbringing played a huge role in your decision to pursue this career.
Yes. A big part of it came from watching my mom run her small business growing up. She sold groceries and then sewing materials and trimming items. So at some point, she had like literally two stores. So I'm very, very proud of her. A very hardworking woman. She would travel to different places, buy inventory, and come and resell it locally. So as a child, or I would say maybe in my teenage years, I was very curious and knowing how I can help her grow her business more because I was very close to my mom. So that slowly pushed me towards like business and then really like finance and management. That's actually what led me to attend business high school, and then like studying marketing in Togo. So looking back now, I would think at that entrepreneurial environment that shaped a lot of how I think about things today.
So I did want to touch on Togo since you mentioned it. When did you come to America? What made you decide that you wanted to pursue your career here rather than in Togo?
So I think that coming to the US is about where I grew up. You really like, look forward to like going somewhere else and trying something different because like the environment in which we are, growth can be a little stifling, and then at some point you don't really know if I'm still here, how is my future gonna be like. And I was fortunate to have my father who's already in the US. He has been living here for a little while, so through him I was able to come to the US. And then something that we may get into later is my mindset when I got here. I wanted to further my education, and my understanding of like how I saw it was that's the key to a better future, if I can frame it that way.
Does your mother live here as well, or does she stay in Togo?
Yeah, she's here as well. And for a little while she was back home, but now she's here. So I'm grateful.
So if you didn't go into this field, what would you have done instead?
Probably construction engineering. I love the idea of building something or using your hand and imagination to create something out of scratch. And
Mhm.
I'm quite fascinated by like buildings, bridges. But you know what they say, right? Man plans and God laughs. So, in a way though, like there's similarity between some engineering and finance. Both involve solving problem, thinking critically, and then try to build something meaningful. In finance, you do build maybe something a little less sophisticated, but you still have to build all those models and then really be able to like understand what the new venture is and then project your cash flow and then all this kind of stuff. It may seem easy, but it also takes like some kind of like building and imagination and being very creative.
It's never too late to go back to school if you wanted to. I know we just finished, but I'm just saying it's never too late if you wanted to pursue engineering on the side or later on, you know?
Well, we'll see about that. I must confess, I tried when I started Peru College. I tried to see like, can I do this? So I took a physics class, which was an elective, and then the first exam went very well. Then I was so excited. I was like, yeah, I think I can do this. And then by the second exam, we started getting into like the more complicated stuff. I was completely lost. So I ended up with the lowest grade,
Mhm.
and then I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work. Maybe it's not now. So I try to stay clear away from that. But maybe something that may work would be like investing in those kind of businesses so that you still feel like you're within that kind of industry. But yeah, who knows?
What was one of the hardest moments early on and what kept you going?
I think for me, it's really moving to the US was really a blessing that I'm very grateful for. But at the same time, too, the early years were quite hard. The culture shock was quite real. I had to adapt to a new country and with my English like, while I was still going to school, and then also like figure out a completely different education system because like I grew up in Togo, which was much more aligned to like a French system. So I have to really navigate all that. And then what made it harder was not really having people who understood the system and to guide me through it. Like from my family standpoint. So it was hard because I didn't know where to start and how to navigate everything. It was a lot of trial and error at times. It felt very overwhelming, but what kept me going was this faith, resiliency, and then I believe that education will create a better opportunities for me, so I just had to like hang on and keep pushing through. Thankfully, along the way, one thing that I can say is like in the US, if you try and show up to the work, find people who will be there to help you, especially in school, like mentors, professors, friends. And I'm genuinely grateful for all of those people who helped me one way or the other for me to be where I am today. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So, which had more impact in regards to how you felt like you were fully aligned and more comfortable with being in the US? Would you say within your undergraduate year or your graduate year?
I think my graduate year was harder because I was working full time and then going to school. But undergrad was harder because it was totally different thing. It was like if someone took me and just threw me in the jungle where I didn't know what is happening. So I had to like literally figure things out. I remember in one of my classes, I think it was a political science class, the professor made it really subject of everybody participating, which basically meant like everybody has to say something.
Hmm.
And for me, it took a year to learn English or to improve on my English and then enroll in a four-year very competitive college. And then this political science, well, like, US political history. I wasn't really like, I didn't know a lot about it. And then I have to read this big book summarizing, it tries to one way or the other kind of present. And he asked me a question that day, and then I just froze. I didn't know what to say. I was like, I did read the material, but like I just didn't know how to say it, what to say, what to start from. And I didn't say anything. And he's like, "What? You didn't read the material?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I did." Like, and then I think to some degree, maybe experience, he sensed that I was just not comfortable, so he moved away. And after class, that's where I'm talking about. Like, you have people who helps you go through things. After
Hmm.
class, he pulled me aside and asked me like, "What happened?" Like, he asked me the same question. I tried to explain it to him. It's like, "Yeah, you could have just said the same thing." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's a class full of people. English is not really my first language. This is my first time in class, my first semester, so I just didn't know how to handle it." So I will say that that professor was like one of my first mentors. Unfortunately, I can't really remember his name right now. Not to belittle other people, but he was just basically like giving me an example of like, "Do you see this class? Like, it's very diverse." So
Hmm.
that kind of like gave me a boost in terms of a boost of confidence. Like, you can do it. So looking back now, I think that from that first class, depending on how he would have handled that situation, could have either demoralized me from pursuing or pushed me to like, have the confidence of saying that, yeah, I can also do it. People are here, I'm not so different from them. So that kind of help. So in that way, I would say undergrad was much more difficult. Grad schools, I've worked for a couple years already, so I kind of knew the system. It's much more about like time management. How do I manage my time to make it to all the classes and pass the exam in graduate school? Thankfully, I had an amazing partner who also helped a lot through undergrad. So yeah, I'm grateful.
I'm glad that that professor at that pivotal moment for you where you just
Yeah,
felt like you weren't comfortable, knew what to say and how to make sure you knew that you could do this, That's
yeah.
really inspirational. Now, let's talk about what actually broke you into this space, because I know that's something a lot of people are trying to figure out. You've worked at places like JPMorgan Chase and Bank of America. What did that process look like for you?
Honestly, it felt daunting, at least, to and the start. And my first full-time role after college was at JPMorgan. But before that, I spent a lot of time trying to build experience however I could. When I was still at Baruch, I tried to do some work study program because like finding the internship was hard. So the college proposes some work study program, which basically like, you get compensated through college. So one of my first opportunities were like with the Office of City University Controller of CUNY
Mm.
in downtown Manhattan. So the Department of Budget and Finance. I remember when I started there, I didn't even know what a pivot table was, and then my manager or my lead gave me a report, and she's like, I just want you to pivot this data and then let me know what the trends look like. And then I sat there for like a good 3 hours and didn't know what to do. I went back to her. It's like, have you been able to finish that? I'm like, no, I'm still working through it. But thankfully, she wasn't like expecting that to happen the same day. So when I got home, I opened my computer, Google how to pivot data, and then it showed me some pivot table, and that's how I started learning about pivot tables. And then one thing leading into the other, getting more experience. So that experience was important because it was the first time I saw what finance professional actually did day by day. But I also wanted to work in banking. After that, I did also have like some other internship opportunities, work at an accounting firm, and then worked for a year at Con Ed, which was really a pivotal moment that actually helped me transition into banking because like I can really genuinely show some experience on my resume and then actually speak to it. And then I joined NABA. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's the National Association of Black Accountants.
Mhm.
So we have a NABA club at the college, which I joined, participating in some event, and then thankfully they always hold annual conferences
Mhm.
where through those conferences you have like a plethora of companies that come and then try to like interview like a candidate on the spot, and then through that I was able to like get my first opportunity with JP Morgan. I got several role and then end up like choosing JP Morgan, but that
Mhm.
was really my the first um way I was able to break into like a finance and then banking per se. I think depending on how you handle things and then depending on your attitude, because like from JP Morgan, I moved to different roles and then I'm at a different bank today. So it depends on understanding, okay, now I'm here. What am I looking for? What do I want to do? Do I understand what is being done right now? Do I want to move to something else? And then how do I get to the next stage or the next step for me? And then that also involves like talking to different people, talking to your manager, trying to be able to really understand what you want, which I understand is easier said than done because the practicality of it doesn't come that easy. But once you are in there, being able to figure that out will help with the next step to come.
2 questions. The Con Edison role, what were your job responsibilities in that you felt was very pivotal and helped you transition to the roles that you were getting at JP Morgan?
So the current role was a real estate analyst. So the real estate department is in charge of sanity check and see what's on the land, what's on the field, and stuff like that. The part that really helps is the analytical part where I was in charge of the project where we have to basically tag every single tower that they have within New York. I was doing that with another colleague, and so it calls upon like being able to like gather data, analyze it, understand it, and then on top of that, like, present it to your manager. Okay, this is what we got. This is like the outcome, and then this is what we think. From our 2 cents, this is the result that we think that you should look into. So that's what I was able to present in terms of like we're going through an interview with like the JPMorgan or Bank of America or Citi, for example. It's like to show them that, well, I'm eager to learn and I've acquired some experience somewhere that are transferable skills to the banking industry. And on top of that, I was majoring in finance, so I have some understanding of like, what corporate finance is. Right? So I think that's in that that's where I would say that that experience will help. And then the other part is that the human aspect of it. I started an internship in the summer and then they extended my internships. Last year in college, I ended up working there for the full year in college. Basically, what I got from that is like my initial goal was just like internship in the summer. If these people kept me after the summer throughout like the rest of the year, it shows something like I'm easy to work with. I'm adaptable. I can really add value to your company.
So the other thing I was going to ask about is Excel, because you mentioned that through your work study, you had to learn pivot tables.
Before I started that work study, that's not something that I've done much of.
Mm.
I only started doing that when I was like confronted with it. This is why like having internship, having experiences are important because it opens your eyes on what do I need to know? What do I need to improve on? But if you just go into class and not really having like a real world experience, you don't really understand the impact of having one knowledge from not having it. But I think what college teaches you is like that critical thinking, right? And then the fact that you don't use it every day can also mean that you may forget. The emphasis is not so much about have you mastered the tools. The emphasis is much more about do you have the right attitude to succeed in this business? Do you have the like the ability to learn, the eagerness to learn? Because there's so much more to learn that is not being taught in school.
Good perspective. So, what should students or recent grads focus on when trying to land their first role? Excel was one of them. What other things would you recommend?
I think in terms of new grad, I would say it depends on what industry you're going into. So if we just like talking about like being in finance or banking, today we have AI tools. You need to also be familiar with AI.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's very important. And then there's other automated automation tools like Ultras, Power Query. If you are in a role where you have to present, obviously PowerPoint, Power BI, but those things, I won't say you don't need to master them, but you need to know of them. You need to be able to like have the basics, and then everything else will get improved on the job. But I would say what is much more important is networking. That's extremely important because at the end of the day, people are the one that are doing the hiring, right? And people want to hire people who can handle pressure, can be relatable, can learn. Relationship matters a lot. So attend networking event, connect with people, join professional organization. That's also how you learn what is needed for this next role that I want to apply. If you are able to talk to someone who's within the company or someone who knows about the role, they might be able to like, tell you how to narrow your focus. And that is important. So just to summarize, I would say, yes, the technical abilities are important, but what is much more important is the networking ability and then be personable, be relatable. Someone they can count on, someone they can work with. I think that's what matters the most.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, before we get into your day to day, I want to take a second to level set for listeners who may not fully understand what a business financial analyst does. At a high level, a business financial analyst is responsible for analyzing financial data to support strategic decision making. They prepare reports, evaluate trends, and provide insights that help businesses improve performance. The role often involves budgeting, forecasting, risk assessment, and working across teams to optimize financial outcomes. So, with that in mind, what does a typical day or week look like in your role?
My role sits much more in between finance, at the front office, which is like our traders, for example, risk, and the regulators, kind of like the middleman between all of those kind of functions. And
Mhm.
then the responsibility is to really make sure that everybody really understand what the business is doing and then understand the business performance. So my day to day can be quite different. Like every day is not the same. Some days I may come and what I'm doing is basically helping the business on some new deal. And then some other days will be to oversee the P&L, profit and loss, and try to understand what the issues that we have. Some other days we'll just be doing a bit for everything and then also collaborating with our different stakeholders, our regulatory teams, our reporting teams, and kind of feeding the information where information has to go. Every single day is never the same. That's part of what I like about the role.
A little surprise here and there.
Yeah, I think that to some degree I'm a very methodical person and kind of like having a clear agenda, but also when you get to some point in your career, you have to challenge yourself in terms of like adapting and reinventing yourself. That might it's not just working like in silo where you only understand one part of it, and so that's also the challenging part because getting an understanding of everything is not as straightforward as you may think. Yeah.
Was going to be my follow-up question, what you found the most challenging about your role?
Yeah, I think challenging part is being able to balance accuracy, speed, and complexity because it's a domain or an environment where things can be very complex, but at the same time, you have to report accurate numbers, right? Like in my role, for example, we have month end and we have quarter end. Quarter ends are like, when you have like all the company reporting there, for example. So you have to prepare for that. And those times can be quite challenging because you have a lot of data to analyze. You have a lot of things to look through and then analyze, understand, and really communicate that to senior management. Like, okay, this was our performance. This is what we did this quarter. And then not just analyze, but you also wanted to understand like, the numbers. What do they actually mean? Right. That's a slight difference. So that can be quite challenging.
Okay. So, as I was looking through your resume, I noticed that within your responsibilities, there tends to be an overlap between business analysts and accountants. So, how do you differentiate the role?
So there's definitely the overlap because both work heavily with financial data. But I would say
Hmm.
traditional accounting is often more focused on recording, classifying, and ensuring compliance of financial information and ensuring you have like a good reporting. In my role, I spend a lot of time understanding what is driving the financial performance. It's not just about reporting accurately, making sure that the credit and debit, tie but it's also understanding the financial performance, analyzing the risk and then the capital impact. Basically, how much capital do we have if we need, if we want to, get a new deal, and then also helping manage the debt. So I think for me, instead of asking are the numbers correct, I'm also asking like, okay, what do these numbers actually mean for the business? So there's a bit of overlap between the two, but the business analysis part comes in where you actually have to sit through and really understand those numbers. But I think there's a slight difference between what I'm saying and what business analysts actually like kind of do. Because in my role, I'm just an analyst to try to help the overall business much more operational. I understand like how the operations work and then obviously how can make basically like add more value to the business. So those are much more of like the nuances between like my role and then what like a traditional accounting role.
So, the industry is evolving fast, especially with AI and automation. How has AI impacted your work in a positive or negative manner?
I would say definitely positive. It helped quite a lot. I think it helped improve like efficiency in a lot of ways. It is about for summarizing information, improving communication, helping structure ideas or assisting in some research and analysis. That has helped quite a bit. And it also helped improve my communication skill verbally. At the same time, I also think that people sometimes underestimate the importance of like, judgment. So AI has been helping guide, but you still need that critical thinking. So whenever I use AI, I still need to sit through it. And it has improved productivity a lot, but depending on how you see it, because sometimes the time that it takes you to really get to the answer that you want can also be quite time consuming. So it depends, but I would say generally overall, it has really tremendously helped with the productivity and also helps with the improving the final results of like what you basically send out.
From what you're saying, I feel like you'd have to have a good understanding and foundation of what it is that you're doing, like what you're looking for. Because like you said, if it keeps iterating different results until you get the result you need, and you
Yeah,
don't know for sure because you don't have that foundation that you
then
doesn't
it
look good for you.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It does. It's like, okay, do you actually really understand what you're looking for? So that's where it always calls upon what are you doing, or like kind of at least have a start of an understanding of what you're looking for. Because the last thing you want to do is like go and present something to your manager, and then like, oh yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
Copilot said that it was right, it was correct. So you don't want to do that.
So one thing that stands out about your journey is how well-rounded your experience is. How important has mentorship been in your journey?
I think for me, mentorship has been quite important. I've always tried to surround myself with people who I can go to and ask questions about like career decision, navigating work challenges, or identifying growth opportunities. And one thing I've learned is that mentorship doesn't uh, to be only about one person. Like, you don't have to only have like one mentor. It depends on the time and space. For example, when I was at JP, I had some mentors there. I still have contact with some people there, but you don't necessarily like carry them with you. At least maybe not all of them to like your next role. Like everywhere you are, you have to like build that network and be able to like find people that you can exchange with. One of the first things that you should do is when you go to a new company, you should try to familiarize yourself with people at the company and then
Mm.
get close to someone who will help you kind of navigate the new company because you wouldn't know what to do or people to talk to. So I think that has been quite helpful. Every role I had someone who I can go to anytime, ask them some question. There were times where at work I had some challenges,
Mhm.
can go knock on their door and be like, "Do you have a few minutes to chat? Like, I'm struggling with this and that. Can you help? Like, what do you think I should do?" Because sometimes you are so much in your head that you don't know what to do. Like the answer can be simple, but it just doesn't occur to you that it may be that simple. So I think in terms of that, it has been very, very, very very helpful. I need someone to hold me accountable, is where mentor can come in as well. It's always good to have someone you can talk to, but that way you don't feel obliged to like maintain certain agenda every single time that you go.
Mm.
I think that's what deter people from having a mentor because then they may feel like, yeah, every time I have to like show up and prove myself that I have something going on, even if I don't have anything going on. That shouldn't be a limiting factor. A limiting factor should just be like, environment where you know that there are people that would always be there for you. It's just like family, right? Whether you talk with them every time or not, you do know that, when the times are hard, they will be there for you.
I like that. I actually attended a session. I'm blanking on her name, but she works at Morgan Stanley, and she talked about how you need to have 3 different type of mentors. I don't remember the specifics,
Mhm.
but it kind of circles back to what you said, where it's like you want to have someone where it could be in the workspace, one that's personal, and it really depends on how you want that relationship to be.
Yeah.
How did your mentoring impact the way that you mentor others?
I think mentoring helps me stay grounded. It reminds me that people look up to me and then also allows me to appreciate how far and then while also encourage me to keep growing and improving myself. I would say that I wouldn't say that I'm always kind of mentoring like a large group of people, but I always try to be very available to give back if like a junior person or whomever needs my professional opinion or just wanted to chat about something. I always try to make myself available to help those people. I think the last year, for example, I had someone at the firm who, wanted to really connect and then we had like a few sessions where we sat down and discussed and through whatever he was going through. That actually at the same time also really helped me to, see things a little bit more differently and then know how to like actually help other people and not necessarily like always thinking about, okay, how do I like just improve myself? But helping other people improve themselves actually also help you like really grow. So yeah, I think it's been great having people that you can also share your acquired knowledge with.
I also wanted to touch on what makes your journey unique. And that's something that we briefly spoke about before because you come from Togo and their native language is French, which is pretty cool. How has being bilingual helped you professionally?
I think not to belittle the fact that you're being bilingual, but I think in the U.S., like it's an English country, not so much because in my day to day, it's not like I speak French, but indirectly, it does help because it allows you to build connections and then also personally maybe make it easy to build relationship because like for someone like me, I have to come out of my shelf to really try to like, build relationship with other people with whom I don't necessarily, share a lot. For example, when you're in an office and at least most people have grown up in the US, there are some things, some references that you have no understanding of. Like they may refer to some things in some movie that they watch in their childhood, for example, that you have no clue about. But at the same time, that curiosity and that vulnerability allows you to build that connection where they're actually eager to share with you what they're talking about, and then you may share with them too what your experience was like. So in that sense, it does help. It comes back to like having different having diversity in the workplace, having different mentality, different way of thinking, different languages. So in that way, it does help like build a relationship and then can make collaboration and communication quite smoother.
Were there ever any opportunities for you to be able to use your French in the professional setting?
I do think in when I was at JP,
Mhm.
because it's an international company, so we were working on something with our office in France where they were sending some document and then the document for some reason were in French. My manager is like, they send this document in French. I
Mhm.
don't know why they send it in French. What are we supposed to do with this? Why can't they send it in English? And then she was sitting there, she was like, wait a minute. You speak French, right?
Mm.
I'm like, yes, I do. But then she goes, we don't have any problem anymore.
Yeah.
So, I had to go through those documents and basically, translate them in English and then explain to her what it was about. And then also, I was put in front of like actually leading that project because like to converse with people in French. They do speak English when you get on the call, but
Mhm.
it seemed to everybody that was easier for someone who spoke French to just like interact with them directly. So I think that was like one instance where it did actually help, even though I felt like the French people didn't want to speak French with me because they thought like should be speaking English.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that was one of the cases, and then most of the time I think in the US just makes it easy for me to connect with the other speaking French people. Because you may
Mhm.
meet people who like maybe from Africa or some other people from France. With actually like in my work, for example, one of the front office guy, director, he's French. And then the day he discovered that I spoke French, we became like buddies just because of that. So that actually helps.
Would you want to work on my projects where you can use French?
I wouldn't mind that. That would be
Okay.
that yeah, definitely that would be great. I think that it's not necessarily much more about the language, but it's much more about or would it be much more about this relationship building, that collaboration, because it's getting out of like what you do day to day and then liaise with different people. I think that would be much more interesting, like just knowing more languages just opens more doors and then just allows the ability to connect with people. And then just the ability to understand what other people are saying in their languages is quite interesting.
Well, we did mention if I were to speak some very basic Creole to you, you probably understand some part of it.
Maybe just one thing or two because Creole is
Yeah.
slightly different because it's a mix of French and at the local language.
Yeah.
So I may be able to pick one thing or two. I actually have
Good.
like some Asian friends I play soccer with, so we do speak in French or in those instances.
Pretty cool. So, as we start to wrap up, I want to shift toward the future. Where do you see yourself in the next few years?
I know the direction I want to go. I'm headed in, so I want to
Hmm.
continue growing and be at the intersection of finance and analytics, which is the
Hmm.
reason why I went into the masters in business analytics. So I want to be in an intersection of finance, analytics, and then strategy. So like advising businesses. So it's kind of like not a consulting role, but something close to that.
Hmm.
And then move to a senior role, kind of like VP director role where I can really like, use data and my finance knowledge and really impacts like business decision making. So I would say for me is less about the title and more about a continuous growth impact and really building experience, really understanding the businesses and then knowing that how do I actually like, add more value? How do I add more value to the company, to my team, and then people I work with. I think that's what really is important to me. So I want to continue learning and expanding my perspective and putting myself in position where I can create meaningful value.
Very admirable. If someone takes one thing away from your story, what should it be?
That's a tough one. I would say be resilient, adaptable, flexible, curious, and continue learning. Always continue learning. But what else? Expanding my perspective and putting myself in, positions where I can actually create meaningful value should be what people can like really get out of this. And then the other important thing is like always try to do your part. Like put in the work, research if you're looking for a job, research opportunities, talk to people, network, apply yourself, and then do your part. Don't focus too much on the outcome. Let go of what you cannot control. Especially for like an undergrad, for example, you don't need to know everything or figure out everything immediately. You just need to keep moving forward and then trying your best, and then everything else will follow.
What does living a refined life mean to you right now?
For me, a refined life, I think it's about balance and being intentional. Of course, career growth and financial stability are important, but I also value peace, meaningful relationship and connection, family, personal growth, and creating a life that feels grounded and fulfilling rather than just, busy, 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 busy.
Hmm.
I think a refined life to me is less about constantly chasing more and more and more about becoming a better version of myself and align myself with what truly matters to me. And I would say faith plays a big role in that for me. More importantly, is about being grateful, trusting God's plan, and learning to let go of what you cannot control.
Hmm.
Um, those perspective, I think that can help anybody, or but that helps me a lot. Navigate everyday life, and then have a different perspective on life, and then really, really have like an internal peace because there's so much I can do. All I can do is like put myself out there and try hard, and the rest is not really up to me.
Agreed. In regards to let go of what you can't control, what was the moment where you felt like you had to learn to accept that? Did you ever struggle with it?
Yes, I think my first role I started professionally was JPMorgan. So that was in Delaware. I wanted to say I did my undergrad in New York, but I've lived in the city for a little while and then I wanted to get out of the city, then just have like a different setting. And so that was a financial business management program, the 2-year program. After the program, you have to find a role where you can stay. So it's either you stay in that role or they let you go.
Hmm.
So after the 2 years, the last role wasn't in, that didn't work out. So I was applying. I did find another role, which I started, but I didn't like it very much. Because I just felt like it wasn't really aligned with what I wanted to do. Because it was
Hmm.
much more like an audit role, internal audit role, which
Mm.
I didn't really enjoy. So then goes like, the journey of like applying to different roles. So I had many interviews and, there were some that at the first round it wouldn't work. There are some times that I went to like second, third round, then it wouldn't work. So for a period of say like 9 months, nothing was happening. And then I can say I was quite disappointed. But as a person of faith, that's where I held on strongly to my faith, and I'm like, there's only so much I can do. So I never gave up. I just kept applying it. And then one day I was just like, I didn't do anything. Why? One day someone reached out to me and they're like, we saw your profile on LinkedIn and then we think that this role may align with you. I'm like, okay, great. And then I'm like, okay, can you send me the role? There were actually two roles. That was my role for Bank of America. And then send me to role. I looked and I'm like, oh, great. This is actually aligned with what I wanted. And then basically accepted, had an interview. And then guess what? The interview, I only had two interviews. And the first interview was literally my interviewer who became my manager literally trying to poach me out of JPMorgan. Like he didn't even really ask me much question. He was just telling me how good this role is and for me to
Yeah.
come in. And then the second one was a little more question because that was a senior manager. And then the first 15 minutes, he asked me a couple of questions. And then after that, it was like over Zoom because that was around like COVID times too. And then he was just like trying to poach me. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. Like I went through like so many interviews
Yeah.
and then the role I'm getting is like an interview where they basically don't ask me anything. They just tell me like about like the role, and then they just tell me like, if you're ready, we hire you today. So it's in those senses where I've learned to, I do what I need to do, not be too concerned about like the outcome, because for me, I mean, as a matter of fact, I think that if it is something is for you, well, it will be there for you. Like if it's not, just you have to be at the place at the right time, and then at the right time, and what did they say? It was the right time and right space or
Right
something
place,
like
right
that.
time.
Right. But if it is for you, it is for you. If it is not, it is not. So, but what you cannot stop doing is stop trying, stop putting in the work. Maybe not what you expect, but who knows, something even better than what you expect. So that's why I try to put an emphasis on the fact that, not try to let go of what you cannot control. Because at the same time too, like if you think about it, a lot of young people today, live with a lot of anxiety, a lot of things. It's because a lot of people want to like own the outcome, control it, and then you get so frustrated because like you did this, I didn't work. I think that obviously we are human, we do, but at some point, we just have to understand that I've done my part. The rest is not really mine. For, if I reach out to someone to network, and then I did what I could, and then that one person who responds could be your card to like, your next step in life. So yeah, the golden ticket. So
Yeah.
just about not overwhelming ourselves too much with things that we don't really have a control over.
That was powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So I think what stands out most is that there isn't one perfect path, but there is a way to stay intentional, stay consistent, and keep evolving. Ismail, thank you for sharing your journey and your insights. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and share it with someone who needs it and stay connected. You can find Ismail on LinkedIn, and we'll link everything in the show notes.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. It was really fun chatting with you.
Thank you. And as always, this is the Refined Brew Collective, where we turn real conversations into real growth. I'm Ashley, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for sharing this moment with me on the Refined Brew Collective. If today's conversation poured into you, take a moment to reflect and pass it along to someone who needs it. Until next time, sip slowly, reflect deeply, and rise intentionally.